Today we're going to talk about past lives, the ins and outs, things people really don't talk about. So if you're new to the past life idea, this is going to be a really good video for you. If you are well versed in past lives, you may still learn a few things or two for your arsenal. As you probably well know, I am very well versed in past lives. I have been working with them since I was a child, and it never ceases to amaze me what keeps popping up. I can only speak from personal experience and from those I have worked with, but in this video I hope to go over some of the stuff that's maybe not talked about, you know, like what happens when you really want to know about a past life and nothing's coming through, or what happens when you feel really connected to something, but modern society says, like, that's ridiculous. You know, it's probably just something you're interested in. It has nothing really to do with any sort of past life stuff. So let's delve in and see where we go from here. So for those of you who have never heard the concept of past lives, it is a thought process that has been around for millennia, really. You know, obviously various religious beliefs have their own idea of what happens after you die. If you look at the similarities of many of the ideologies of religious beliefs, you will find that other than sort of like organized religion, many of them have this concept of life after death, and that we don't really die as like us humans think we die. You know, it's not the end, that we will go somewhere or we will become reincarnated. And reincarnated means you're coming back for another show, not necessarily here on Earth, but on other planets as well. And so the idea of past lives in the most recent years has really caught on. The concept of past lives really stems from the idea of learning. And so the whole purpose in coming back is to keep learning or bettering your knowledge for the whole, right? So your soul can be complete. And depending on who you talk to, you know, some people will say, especially like in Tibet, they will say, you know, we and actually, you know what, this goes to ancient Egypt too, where they believed that in the beginning, when Ta was a creator of all things, you know, the souls spent so much time as the smallest things, a blade of grass, an earthworm, and then eventually, you know, you move up the ladder and you get to experience it as humans. Some people believe that you either come back as a specific gender, or you know, you get to swap genders. And I personally believe that in order to further your experience and your knowledge and your learning, you're going to spend probably equal times as both genders. I know I definitely have. In fact, if you can hear the music right now, this is one of my experiences, and this is one of my compositions from an earlier life. So, and I was male in that life. But the idea of coming back and learning as a male or female, so you can experience both, is quite common. Not everybody believes that, but definitely the idea of coming back to learn lessons, to work on karma. Some people now believe that karma doesn't actually exist anymore. And others still feel it does. As the world keeps changing, and it's changing very, very fast, you know, ideas and concepts and ideologies will keep changing with it as we learn more, as more people are not afraid to come forward to tell their experiences. And, you know, this is my experience as a starseed coming in here again with missions to fulfill and knowledge to give. And so You know, I'm more than happy to forward my knowledge onto you. That doesn't mean that it has to be the absolute truth for you. Take what resonates with you and then just leave the rest, you know, and always keep digging for the knowledge within inside you. And that's what I'm really here to do. I talk about past lives a lot because this is something I'm really passionate about. This is what I feel has been with me my whole life. As you know, like I've always been interested in history, and there's reasons for that. You know, when I was younger, people would always say, it's really amazing how when you talk about history or when you make a piece of clothing or when you're making a historical recipe, it's almost like we can feel that we're there in that place with you. It's not just something that you brought forward, you found in a book, or you know, you saw in a museum and you're reproducing. There's something different about it. There's something that makes us feel like we can actually understand what it was like back then. And that always really struck a chord with me. I didn't understand why it was like that, but I did feel really connected to history. And when you start understanding and being able to conceptualize how things really work, you know, that time is not linear and that the world around you, the system that most of you are in, is not actually how the real world works once you can get out of that system. You are currently trained from little on to be believing in specific things, to not question, to not seek knowledge. But how often do you actually just take something for granted just because, you know, a religious leader or, you know, a boss or a government or somebody tells you this is the way it is? It happens more often than not. And if you remember throughout history, the only time that revolution or change actually happened is when people stopped accepting what the masses were telling them, what the people in charge were telling them, and started listening to themselves and to their own souls, and started really thinking about where they are on this planet, where they are in life, and what's really going on. You know, that's when change happens. And that's where we are right now. So it's a really wonderful time. And as more people wake up, they're going to be searching for knowledge. And so once you can grasp the concept of past lives, and it's strange that we call it past because time is not linear. So even though for us as humans, you know, in the third and fourth dimensions, we conceptualize time because this is what we were told as, you know, stuff in ancient Greece that was way back there. And there's no way that we can jump in a time machine and go back there. Well, I'm here to tell you that that is not necessarily the case, and that is probably for another topic. But when you think of your past lives, don't think of them as past, as, you know, they happened years ago and that's it. On the contrary, you know, on the scale of time, if time was like many lines, right? You know, like you think of like a piano board, and you see all the different lines for the keys, the wires. You could jump from line to line. And there was a great video out that I saw once that really explained this well, because it gets into a lot of really difficult scientific information, and I thought they really presented it well. But if you think about it as like, you know, guitar, I have no idea what that was. If you think about it as like a guitar string or like a violin string or like, you know, piano strings, and you just keep lining those strings up, that's really what time is. So we may be in this incarnation here now, but that does not mean that this is our only incarnation or that this is the only thing that we're currently doing right now. You know, aside from living our other lives on Earth, we are probably, some of us, I know I am, also having lives on other planets. And so this gets into a really confusing concept of self-realization when you realize that this portion of you, this human body of you, is just a human body, that, you know, pieces of you can be in different places at once. And so that gets a little bit more in depth into the past life concepts. Now, something that I found very interesting when I was asking a couple questions about my past life, one of my past lives, and this information came through when I wasn't really bothered per se, but I was almost in disbelief that that I could have been, you know, in the Egyptian royalty. And I really wanted to be careful about this because of, you know, when I was younger, when I was just learning about this, people would always say to me, or in general, I probably read it numerous places, that when you delve into your past life, don't expect to be somebody important, because everybody wants to be somebody important and nobody is. There's very few people that are. And that was just the total opposite of me. I don't want to be anybody important. I just want to feel home. Like, I have a hard enough time here on Earth feeling home, let alone building onto that I was somebody of importance in a specific time frame. And so I was going about this really carefully, and I reached out to just double check. And even those of us who like deal with past lives on a constant basis still reach out to people for reassurance, you know, that we're definitely on the right track, or we're still human, so we need that pat on the back, you know, like yes, you're correct, or no, like you missed something here. And so they were very interested that I was able to pull that Egyptian life. Not only because I've had many, many Egyptian lives, but because that life was not in my, not in my book, I should say, for this life. Like, if you think about each life, before you come in, you know, you write this life plan, and you kind of map out exactly what you want to accomplish, what you want to learn, who you're going to interact with. This is all very meticulously planned out. And obviously when you get down here, there's free will, and that's what makes everything so interesting. And so before going into this, I just assumed that you could pull from any past life you wanted to, really. You know, and that's not necessarily false. You can, but what I learned from that meeting is that there are certain past lives that you write into your book, that you bring that experience and knowledge with you into this lifetime. It doesn't mean that your other lives that you lived, or your other incarnations, or your other selves are not as important. It just means that if you were mixing up some potions or some medicine or something, you know, you have all these different herbs to choose from, and you're going to pick the best herbs for the job, the ones that are going to help you heal quicker, get back on your feet faster. And so it's the same thing with your lives. The amount of lives that most of us have lived, or the amount of incarnations that most of us have had, is inconceivable. You know, it's to the point where most of us, now granted, like Dolores Cannon talks about the different waves of people that are coming in, the 3 waves where they don't have like real Earth past lives, and that's like a completely different story. So what I found out was that not all of us are like that. Just because we have come in here in Earth in this time, and we are very much star people, we still have our own memories of Earth, that we have incarnated here before. And a lot of times these incarnations are during times of great turmoil or great change on the Earth. So this is what really propelled me, because I wanted to better understand, as starseeds, you know, are we all just implanted with memories? Because it kind of makes us very non-personable. you know, not very unique, not really experiencing the full human experience, in my opinion. And so what I found out was that it's not necessarily true. But my past lives on Earth here have all been lived in times of great change, and I have helped in that whole catalyst of change in some facet, you know, whether it was a musician or whether it was, you know, in the royal family that I didn't have a very long life because we all got killed. You know, it was always something that was bringing great change. So Starseeds do have actual past lives. It's not just like a computer program that's put in. Some of them do, some of them don't. I'm one of them who has actually had past lives. Now, the interesting portion about the past lives, and we're going to get back to this whole Egyptian thing, is that they were very interested in the fact that I was able to pull this specific past life in Egypt. And the reason is because I didn't put it in my book to come here. It was a life that, in their words, not in mine, that was not one of my favorites. And so I didn't really need it here. I needed my experience from other past lives to better help me here than that one. And so they were just very interested that somehow I was able to pull that one sort of from the ethers, you know, from my Akashic records that are not in like the little book that I carry around. This is where this becomes important. You may only think like, oh, you can only remember so many past lives. Well, that's only because the past lives that you are remembering are the past lives that you have in your book right now. That doesn't mean that's the only lives you've lived, okay? You can pull from those other lives, but it's not as easy as the ones you have in your book. One of the reasons that we don't come in knowing all of our past lives is very simple. It's overwhelming. And even the lives that you put in your book, your current book, would be overwhelming. And the reason for that is because once you are ready to incorporate the past life, you actually incorporate it into your current life. And really, remember, it's not past, it's all present. But you're incorporating pieces of you then into the pieces of you now. And that knowledge that you gained from that life is going to help you in this life. But it's almost like the schooling and the student. You can't understand, you know, the answer to D if you don't understand the concepts of A, B, and C to get to D. But it really brought it home to me as to why they don't want the Akashic records opened up just randomly. And if you guys don't know what the Akashic records are the library where all of your past lives are housed. And as I was thinking about this, it's been in my mind for a couple weeks now to make a video, and synchronicity just so has it that I was listening to a channeling. They were talking to Thoth, and if you guys don't know, Thoth is in the Egyptian realm. You know, he's the keeper of wisdom, the keeper of writing. So he went on to further explain that when people are constantly looking for their past lives and constantly wanting to go into the Akashic records, that it's for their own safety that unless the specific past life will help them at that point, it's sort of off limits. And that makes complete sense to me, is because it's not time to integrate it into your life, right? Now just think if you had 20 or 30 past lives that you knew all at one time and that you had to integrate. It would be very, very overwhelming. And that actually happened to me. I decided that I was going to see how much information I would be allowed. And so I did ask this general question about my past lives. And I said, well, can we just kind of list off some of my past lives that are here to help me now? And so as these past lives got listed off, it was one right after another. And normally that's not going to happen, so don't expect that. That's normally not the way it goes. But because they weren't past lives that were like normal farming or like normal housewife past lives, they were really intricate, really overwhelming, and for the most part, I just sat there kind of stunned. And while everything was trying to process in my head, it made perfect sense, you know, as to, okay, so this piece in this life relates to that piece at that life. But it was so much information so quickly that it just like blew my mind. And for probably a week or so, I just couldn't function. I mean, I think they gave me that information because they knew that I could totally handle it. Like, it may take me a bit to process it, but that I could totally handle it, and it's not the normal circumstances. So this is why, like, as a human, you know, your DNA upgrades when you think about raising your vibration and all the stuff that's happening. It's happening in sequences because it would totally overwhelm you if it all came at once. And the whole past life is exactly like that. So I think that when in dealing with past lives or when wanting to know your past life, it's always good to watch for signs. It's always good to keep track of what's going on in your mind. For example, when I was younger, like little younger, I had these dreams of being in this Egyptian palace and dealing I was a woman, dealing day-to-day stuff, and in dream world, when I would talk, you know, to people or to my husband, I knew that I was saying the words, you know, Tut or Tutankhamun or however that is in that language at the time. And as a kid, it was just dreams. It was just dreams that made me feel happy and at home, and that's all it was, you know. But I wrote them down. I started a dream journal, and I wrote them down from little on. And so after this all came about, I ran to those journals, like they're like deteriorating now, and I looked it up, and I was like, oh my goodness, clues were there around me all the time. And had I not written this down, all I would have had was my fading memory. And so now that I know where that dream comes from, that it was an actual past life. And so this was the Ankhesenamun past life and the King Tut's mother past life. And that one is already up. You guys can check that out on the past life episodes. That's not something that would strike me as a past life. It just wouldn't. It would just strike me as something I was interested in. And this has happened for almost every single past life that I currently know. If my brain thought about it when I was younger, if it was in my thought process, if it was in my hobbies, if it was something I enjoyed researching, all of that stuff I am finding is actually significant. And it all relates back to random past lives that I have had. So I'm saying to you, when you have a ridiculous obsession or you are so interested in something like Atlantis, or you had dreams as a kid, you know, in a specific place, those are not just dreams, and those are not just random hobbies or random interests. You know, it all points us on a path, and chances are those are actually significant. So you need to take stock of that, and you need to recognize that. And those are the flags that if you can recognize when they pop up, you will be in a better position to recognize your past lives or to understand your past lives. You know, then you'll be ready quicker, and they can come to you. Let me just quick tell you about another one, and we're gonna run through this all in the past life stories. But this one right here is just so strange to me because this again has to do with the twin flame and stuff. But how this whole past life relates is actually pretty fascinating. When I was in high school, I met this guy who he had graduated, he was in college, he was becoming a teacher. And he actually worked in the theater department. We became really good friends, and it was really strange how quickly we became friends. And I remember this one specific time. We were heading to a friend's house, and he was driving, and we didn't really know each other very well at that point. Like, when you think of normal friendship and how it progresses to get to a comfortable spot to be able to say these things. But randomly, out of my mouth, I said something to the effect of, if I'm not married by the age of 25, I'm gonna place a bet that you and I should get married. And again, like, I had just met him. I didn't know like any personal stuff about him at that time. I didn't know anything, really. I mean, we had just met. And he goes, yeah, I'll take that bet. And I said, well, that's good, because I don't do very well in like relationships, and so nobody's gonna want to marry me. Even back then in high school, I was just different. Like, I just always marched to the beat of my own drum, and I didn't know any of this. I didn't know anything about galactics or DNA, or I wasn't even interested in like alien stuff, or I was always interested in DNA because of being adopted and how that related to the family that you're adopted in, and all that stuff. But it wasn't something that I spoke about. I never even spoke about Egypt to this guy. And I was just absolutely fascinated with Egypt, but it was something that just never came up. And so he took the bet, and shortly after, my grandparents took me to this museum for a traveling exhibition of, like, an Egyptian traveling exhibition. I don't remember which one it was, but I got separated from them. And I remember going into what looked like a doorway. And so as a kid, like in high school, I was always interested in museums and artifacts and stuff like that. So I was going to actually be a museum curator. So I kind of knew, like, how this stuff happened, like the interactive exhibits and stuff like that. And so I walked up into this, and I thought, in my mind, I was like, oh my God, this is the most amazing interactive exhibit that I've ever been into. I walked into this tomb, and everything was so real. It was so real, like the paintings on the wall and the ceiling and the dirt, and you could smell it, and I was touching the walls, and I was like, oh my God, this is the kind of museum curator that I want to be. I want to be able to make this stuff so real that you can smell the dirt, and you can smell the dampness, and you can touch the wall, and it's so real. And I was just fascinated. I was absolutely fascinated. And I stood there and stared at the ceiling. And the ceiling had these stars on it. And I was just in awe. Like, I can't even describe the feeling. And the feeling was a feeling of being home. And that's something that I, up until recently had been searching for my whole life. Just wanting to feel home, wanting to feel like I belonged. And this made such a lasting impression on me, I didn't want to leave. And I must have stared at that ceiling for, it seemed like hours. I'm sure it was just minutes. But I finally, came out of it and met up with my grandparents. And I said to them, we were in the gift shop, and I was like buying my little Senate game, which I'm really good at, by the way. I love Senate. And I said to them, I said, did you see that tomb that you could just walk into? And it was so real. And my grandma and my grandpa are like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Well, there's no tomb. And then so I said, no, just ask the lady. The lady will tell you. And she's like handing me my Senate game, and she's like, yeah, no, we don't have any, exhibit or any interactive exhibit like that. She was just like really confused, and I was really confused, and I was like, oh, dang, well, what happened? And I never really gave it much thought. I always had it in the back of my mind. Never really gave it much thought until a couple years ago. I was like paging through this Egyptian book, and I saw those same stars on the ceiling, and I saw the same painting like on the walls. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is what happened when I was a kid. Like, this is the tomb that I was in when I was a kid. And you know whose tomb it just so happened to be? Nefertari, who was the queen to Ramses the Great, right? And so I was kind of shocked. Like, when I was doing some shadow work and some past life work, this past life came up, and I didn't understand what it had to do with my best friend at the time. Later on, I found out that this is the past life that they were really surprised that I figured out. And in that time, when I was in that tomb, that was like jumping. Like not necessarily time jumping. I mean, it is time jumping because I ended up in her tomb and I was in the museum. Like, how do you explain that? And it was real. But that's the same way that you can jump back and forth. And this is a topic for another day, but it still deals with past lives. So I was actually in that tomb. I jumped timelines to be able to be in that tomb, but I did jump, and that's part of my past life. And come to find out, my twin is actually Ramses the Great reincarnated, and that's a completely another story. But just the idea, what I want you to take away from this big long story is that as a child, I didn't know any of this. I mean, the first introduction I had to it was in high school, and it came in bits and pieces. First I met my twin, my best friend. At the time, I had no idea the significance of it, other than that, like, I was home, I felt home with him. And then, a couple months later, I randomly end up in this, like, tomb, and to finally get to that point where you can put all of these pieces together and then realize, oh my goodness, so that's when this introduction to this past life started. And so there has to be a good reason for it, and then to be able to integrate what you learned in that past life into this past life. So I hope that this helps explain past lives a little bit better. I want you to take away from this the idea that your past lives are all around you. It's not something that's elusive that you will never be able to grasp or understand. It's all around you. You just have to look for the clues. You just have to be open enough to receiving the clues. And even if you don't know what they mean at the time, recognize that it's something important and just keep it in the back of your mind. And then before you know it, the time will come and you will be privy to these past lives, and you will be able to connect the dots in your life as to the information you were given to slowly guide you into what these past lives were, what you took away from them, that it's not something that has to be such a mystery. It's all here inside you. You come in with your book of chosen past lives to help you through your journey here in this incarnation. So use that knowledge that you brought with you, but just remember, there comes a point in time where you are ready to learn about them, and they will be shown to you. Before that time comes, you're not going to get too much information because they don't want to overwhelm you. You have enough going on with your upgrades and experiences here on Earth to bring in other experiences on other timelines. So I hope this enlightens you a bit. And I think we will close with a bit of light language. I'm hearing Syrian coming through. Shuko hoya na tikana leo oya boya hotia shana. Kia tiana ho obialaya o miana tikaya shata aya ogyanata. Kiata liguaya no tuku puya shitiana taya ada. Dianaha. Dija dialea o onia pia dia da hana. Dia kaya dia maa ku uya amaun dia shika odu ay mahianana. Pishikia boyanata. Kilia onia takashiana. Dia alea obia ia kana yahana. Dile shukubiana hatia ka oyana dai. Kaya aya o mia hana taya shikaya nada. Dileo noto puhu. Diana shikiana io di oko koyana shikana. Namaste.